I like the Mario games. There are barely any mainline entries I'd consider bad or even just mid, and 3D Mario is the big one. Most of them are great, but they've taken different forms over the years, so I thought I'd take a look at the different structures of the 3D Mario games. Mario 64 was the first 3D Mario game and effectively the first 3D game in general. Miyamoto decided on a more freedom-oriented style. You can get stars in any order. For example, in Bob Battlefield, the majority of people do the 6th star first. Some levels are locked behind star doors or other barriers, but generally you could do whichever ones you want. There are 120 stars, but you only need 70 of them to beat the game, which is good because a lot of the stars are pretty shit. You can get any combination of stars you want, meaning you can avoid most of the shitty ones. Well, not any combination. You still need a certain amount of stars to access the later floors like I mentioned earlier. One thing I don't like in some Mario games is how progression works. Not the typical progression, but more so the first world having very few levels and the later ones having way more. Because the first world is so quick, it makes the later ones feel so much longer by comparison. It's setting up false expectations. It isn't much of an issue in this game because having more stars just allows you to have more options, which is a good thing. I think needing 60 to beat the game would have been better. With 70 you still need to do some bad ones. Now let's look at the structure of the levels. You're put in an open area with stars spread across the map. You need to beat certain stars to access some others. Like Koopa the Quick who only spawns after you beat King Babam. But you can get most without beating any others. There are a variety of missions in each level, I'm not going to list them all. But there are some archetypes. The 100 coin stars are in every main level and they generally suck. A big part of that is draw distance. What that means is that things don't load unless they're close to the player. And it's pretty bad in this game. The other reason is that some of the levels are bad. 64 has some jank and the 100 coin stars showed off the most. A decent chunk of the 100 coin stars are fine, but for levels like Tick-Tock Clock or Rainbow Ride it can get ridiculous. Because they're so long, chances of jank happening is much higher. Another common archetype is boss battles. Most of these are pretty bad. You just do an action 3 times. Red coin stars are like 100 coin stars, but there are only 8 red coins. Because the much lower number, you probably won't have to run around the map 3 times to look for the 3 coins you missed. And they're generally placed in better hiding spots rather than being randomly scattered. Secret stars can be obtained by toads or finding secrets like the aquarium in Jolly Roger Bay. You only get 1 star from these rather than the 7 in the main levels. The other thing is how you actually progress. In order to get to the next floor you need a key. And to get the key you need to do a Bowser fight. These levels are platforming challenges ramping up in difficulty as you go. Bowser in the Dark World is the easiest, but still relatively challenging on a first playthrough. How the Bowser fights actually works is that you need to grab Bowser's tail and chuck him into the bombs. I've never been good at this. It's a little strange that you don't beat Bowser by jumping or doing anything Mario-like, but it's fine. But they ramp up in intensity with Bowser getting new abilities and more health for the final fight. They're fine bosses. That's about it for Mario 64. Now let's take a look at Sunshine.
Arrivederci.
Now, Sunshine is my favorite Mario game, but the structure is a downgrade from 64. The big thing is that you can't pick what order you do the shines. You can pick the area to an extent, but to beat the game you need to do the 7th mission of every level. 7th mission is a Shadow Mario fight and it's pretty lame. You just follow him and hold the spray nozzle. Some of them are more or less complex, but they're pretty bad generally. The levels themselves are still really open. They're big and you can still get the 100 coin shine in any mission. But unfortunately it boots you out of the level unlike the 64 version. Flood nozzles are in difficult areas and can enhance your exploration. The hub world got a pretty big upgrade. It's a lot bigger and more lively. It feels like an actual hub and all the levels are in the same location. You can see the levels off in the distance. You can find secret levels like 64, but I don't know, for some reason they just feel better than that game. I don't know why. If I had to guess, it's that it feels more natural because of the interconnectivity. The other structure thing is blue coins. There are 240 of them hidden across the world. You get some of them by helping NPCs or just exploring, and yeah, it's tedious to collect all of them, but I think in concept they're a good idea. If you don't want to do a shine, you can buy a shine with blue coins. It fixes the issue of being forced to do a shine you hate to beat the game. I mean, there aren't many shines that are absolutely miserable, but whatever. There are definitely some stinkers, but I don't think any of them are to the level of Rainbow Ride. Except you're forced to get most of the shine, so it doesn't work. And 64 blue coins would have worked really well, but this isn't 64. But on the bright side, the bosses got a pretty big upgrade. They're generally a lot more complex than just jump on their head 3 times. Even the simpler ones like Gooper Blooper are still miles ahead of Tiny Huge Island Wiggler. Secret levels are different than the ones in 64. There are generally 1 to 2 of these in every level. The environment changes to this weird screen dimension. I don't mind the change. I prefer the normal world, but this looks cool too. It's very weird and alien. In terms of platforming, these are usually the tougher levels. Primarily because you don't have FLUDD. Luckily, Sunshine's movement is ultra tight, so it isn't an issue. Well, I'm sure it is for some people, but, you know, not to people who are good at video games. Some of them are easier than others. You could come back to these with FLUDD, but this time there's a timer. The timers vary on how forgiving they are, but the timers that barely give you any time are my favorites. Sunshine still has the openness and scale of 64, but it doesn't have the same element of freedom. Sunshine and 64 were pretty similar structure-wise. The Galaxy games are the first to be drastically different. They added some linearity. It's in between traditional 3D Mario and 2D Mario structure-wise. By the way, I have zero clue why people complain about this. Why is a linear game having slightly bigger levels? Why is that a big deal? Could someone please explain that to me? First, Galaxy 1. Instead of the big open areas, you move from different planets and each planet has a set of obstacles. It's not completely linear though. There are branching paths you can occasionally go to and get extra stars. Like 64, you can choose whatever stars you want to get. As long as you get to 60, you're golden. Though you have to beat the stars in the galaxy in a certain order. You also have multiple floors like 64, though there are way more than 3. To progress, you have to unlock the Bowser level with the stars you earned. Galaxy brought back the Bowser boss fights and they're substantially better. Most revolve around trying to get him to burn himself. Like 64, they ramp up in intensity, and they revolve around the core mechanic being the spin, other than some weird mechanic that's never used again. The spin being a universal thing helps make the bosses feel like they're a part of the game. They did do this before when you beat the boss by jumping, but the spin hits the perfect combination of being related to the game and making for good boss fights. Bowser isn't the only boss. There are a variety of others that are great. Comet stars are harder versions of existing levels. There are purple coin comets which are closer to new stars than variants. And they're similar to the 100 coin stars / 100 coin shines in 64 and Sunshine respectively. Both are slower, more exploratory levels. Daredevil comets only give you 1 health to beat a boss. Pretty self-explanatory and makes things a lot harder. The final type are the speedrun comets. These give you a timer and you need to beat the level in that amount of time. Galaxy 2 is a very similar game to Galaxy 1 in a lot of areas, but the structure is actually slightly different. It's more linear. You have a world map just like the 2D games, and on that world map, Hungry Luma's return. You have more galaxies, but they only have 3 stars per level compared to Galaxy 1 where you could get like 6. It's a personal preference, but I prefer Galaxy 1s. One of those has to be locked away with Comet Medals, which are the new collectibles. The level design also got a lot more linear, which isn't a good or bad thing, just a difference. Something that is a big difference, that you need 70 stars instead of Galaxy 1's 60. 60 feels like the perfect amount. You'll barely have to do any bad missions and you have enough content. Maybe it isn't too much of a drop in quality, but certainly feels like it, because a lot of the stars are locked behind common medals, so you have even less good stars to choose from. That's probably why the levels feel a lot worse than Galaxy 1's. You once again have bosses at the end of the world. This time some of them incorporate Yoshi. The boss design is still pretty strong. Bosses like Fiery Gobblegut are kind of an evolution of the Daredevil Comet. Instead of having the same boss with 1 HP, you fight a remix of that boss with a different design. The biggest issue with Galaxy 2's structure are the green stars. They're just insanely tedious and you need to get 120 of them. Typically 3D Mario and 2D Mario were very different in terms of style. This was because having 70 3D levels on the N64 just wouldn't work. But with 3D Land and 3D World, Nintendo tried doing a 2D Mario in the style of a 3D Mario. At the time people didn't really like this, but now people realize the format's pretty good. Let's start with 3D Land. It works like a 2D Mario. You're put into a level and need to go to the flagpole. Star coins return from the new Super Mario Bros. Game to reward exploration. The areas don't have the level of exploration something like the 100 coin stars have, but star coins are a nice addition anyway. The area isn't as big or open, so it's more akin to temporary branching paths on a line as opposed to a big circle you can explore. It does this thing I complained about in the 64 segment where the first world requires like 2 collectibles and then 40 by the 4th. Gives a false expectation, it makes it feel more like a slog. but it isn't a big issue. The big thing is that 3D Land has 8 special worlds. 3D Land isn't an interesting enough game in terms of level design or environments for me to really care, but for the people who love this game, you get a ton of extra content. 3D World improves on 3D Land in terms of structure. First, the world map. You get the choice of what levels you want to play, and the world map is more of a map than the line in Land. You get to explore the map on foot, and you get to find coins and other smaller rewards. Special events can pop up like gambling. The main levels have 3 green stars, which are effectively star coins. Mini levels have some extra green stars. Captain Toad levels have 5. They're puzzle boxes you need to solve. The catch is Captain Toad can't jump, so you need to work around that. The Captain Toad levels in 3D World aren't as interesting as the ones in his own game. A big part of that is that the environments aren't as interesting, but they're still fun. Mini boss fights give 1 star. You need to beat a big enemy. Mystery houses can give you multiple mini challenges and vary in terms of the amount of stars you can get. They're time challenges, and as you might be able to tell, I like that kind of stuff. It creates a fun kind of pressure that makes simple tasks more interesting. Use the green stars you get from these levels to progress. And again, you have a ton of special worlds. But this time the level design is incredible, so they actually interest me. Similar to 3D Land, there's a special final level you can unlock, and at the end of the castle in each world you fight a completely unique boss. And the boss design is pretty good. Odyssey was famously returned to the traditional style of 3D Mario, but it wasn't really. It's different than 64 and Sunshine. It's significantly more open, almost to an open world level. Well, some of them. Kingdoms of different sizes. Some are effectively boss fight arenas, some are more in line with 64 and Sunshine, and the big kingdoms. The big kingdoms fit best for this style. What I'm talking about are moons. Instead of stars or shines, moons are more like green stars in 3D World. Smaller rewards you get for exploration. You have this huge sandbox to explore and find things. Most moons have a specific challenge you need to do. Some people don't like that, which is fair enough, I suppose. The collectibles are a lot less substantial than a star or a shine, but that style works for this game. The focus of Odyssey is the insane movement. Think of any weird challenge or goal you want to do and you could probably do it. And that means the moves themselves don't matter as much as they used to. They still matter, but it's more of a vehicle for the movement. If anything, the complaint of things not being satisfying applies way more to Bonanza than Odyssey. For Odyssey, it's more of a personal preference than an actual issue. For the record, I don't think it's like a massive issue in Bonanza as well. I just think it's more legitimate to complain about it in that game. Odyssey isn't completely devoid of traditional missions though. Multi-moons are basically that. You typically fight a boss or do some big task. Anyway, there are also a couple branching paths on the world map. It's nothing crazy, just oh, which one do I want to do first? But also on the world map are the harder post-game areas, which are always a nice addition. Overall, Odyssey has a great structure. We're at the most recent game now. Bowser's Fury is a true open world take on 3D Mario. Everything is a part of one big level, meaning no loading. This adds a ton of freedom of how you tackle things. You can ride around on Plessy and stop at whatever seems interesting. It's a fun mix-up. Some of the missions are similar to others, but it never felt repetitive. It's a well-executed open world. It's split up into several islands with cat shines to collect. Cat shines are basically moons. If you remember, which I hope you do, it was like 30 seconds ago, I said moons being smaller scale was fine because the movement was the focus. So you might think that's actually an issue for this game because it doesn't have the same movement system. And yeah, it does feel a lot less substantial than a game like Galaxy, but that's probably more because of other reasons considering Bonanza is the same issue, and that game still feels substantial. I just don't think having smaller scale collectibles is that bad of a thing. The progression is centered around Fury Bowser. He'll occasionally appear and you have to dodge his attacks and such. But once you get enough shines, you get the Giga Bell and you get to fight him. It's just really satisfying to fight him, and he has enough attacks to say interesting every time. When you beat him, another part of the map unlocks. Once you do this enough, you get to fight the final boss and beat the game. It's a pretty simple structure. It's a good concept and it would be interesting to see what they could do with it in a future title. So what would I like the next 3D Mario game to be? There are a lot of good options, but if I had to say one, probably 64 Sunshines. Purely because we haven't seen that style since the GameCube, and I'd like to see what they could do with it in the modern day. Galaxy 3 could certainly work, but you already have Astrobot, which is effectively that. Plus, I think the early 3D Mario formula has more potential. 64 is aged in some areas, and Sunshine is a little unpolished sometimes. I want to see what that formula can do when it's firing at all cylinders. I'd be happy with a 3D World too. Another game I love, but I just don't think there's a lot of potential for a sequel. 3D World kind of perfected everything. The Bowser's Fury formula can work, I'm just not as excited about it as I am some of the others. The Odyssey formula is great, but we just got Bonanza, which is similar. That's another thing where I don't think there's too much more they could do. If you have pitches for any of these, leave them in the comments, you might convince me. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed. I'm working on a pretty big Mario project, so if uploads are a little slow or short, that's why. It's also because my ADHD has been being a fucking bitch, like Jesus. I spend 10 days editing the first half of the video, right? Then my ADHD suddenly says, okay, you can knock out the other half in like a day. And it's like, why couldn't I do that before? I know ADHD is far from the worst disability or illness, whatever, but like... it's really fucking annoying. This was a fun video to make, and I hope it was a fun video to watch. That's about it. See ya.